Good day, Humanistas. So this is a continuation of our discussion about the concept of state. Today, I'm going to discuss to you the concept of government. And prior knowing the nature and the characteristic of a government, let me ask you first this question. Why government should exist? What do you think? Government should exist because there is a need to have a government. And government exists and should continue to exist for the benefit of the people governed. Meaning to say that the existence of a government is necessary for the security of persons, not only of persons, but also property and for the administration of justice. Imagine a world without government. What do you think will happen? What will happen in a society where government is non-existent? Actually, if there is no government, there will be anarchy and disorder. General feeling of fear and insecurity will also prevail, and progress and development will not really happen. It is impossible for progress and development to happen without a government that will do it and support progress and development. Not only that, the values that we had been preserving and cherishing for a long period of time will be taken for granted. And the enjoyment of truth, freedom, equality, justice, peace and order, okay, the rule of law, and human dignity can never be enjoyed. Therefore, it is hard, even unimaginable and terrifying to think of a society without government that implement laws and legal systems. Considering, for example, that even in the existence of government and laws, sometimes disorder still ensues. Let us define the term government. Government refers to the agency through which the state expresses its will. Meaning to say, it is through the government that the desire and aspirations of the people can be enjoyed and can be achieved. Then the state cannot exist without the government. Okay? And in the Philippines, we have three branches of government, which later on we will discuss that. Okay? The three branches of government, the nature of these three branches, their powers, and their responsibility to the state, to the people. Okay? Now, government, in differentiating it with the state, includes only the functionaries of the state that occupies a small portion of the population. And since government is entrusted of the power given by the state, the basis then of how and when is the government uses the power is through the existence of a constitution. Because as we said, the constitution will define the relationship of the government and the people. And we will have a discussion about the concept of constitution. Okay, don't worry about that. How the state then differ from the government, or how the government differ from the state. The government is just an instrument or agency through which the will of the state is articulated, manifested, or expressed. As I said a while back, that it is through the government that the desires and aspirations of the state, meaning the people, can be achieved. Okay? And in a wider conception, The government consists of all organizations charged with reaching and implementing decisions for the community. So the government then has the responsibility to reach and implement decisions for the welfare of the people in the society, for the common good of all. Okay? And as you see in my PowerPoint presentation, that there are three branches of our government. We have the legislative, the executive, and the judicial branch of government. The classic case of government was made in the 17th century by Thomas Hobbes. And Hobbes' view of the government was that the government provides the people with protection from the harm that they would otherwise inflict on each other in their quest for gain and glory. So we can see here that in the view of Thomas Hobbes, there is really a significant role on the part of the government to maintain peace and order in the society. Because as Thomas Hobbes stated, that the state of nature is nasty, brutal, and short. And there is a big possibility that people in the society will inflict harm among themselves because that's their nature. That the state of nature is chaotic according to Thomas Hobbes. And so, in order to prevent the people from harming each other, because in the first place, they have different aspirations and ambitions in life which lead them to conflict and inflict harm on each other. So the government is really needed in order to prevent this kind of harm in the society. So the government thus plays a vital role in securing and maintaining peace and order in the society. And that governance denotes the activity of making collective decisions in order to prevent the people from harming each other. Okay? But how do we classify government? Are there methods to be made in order to classify government? And what are these? Now, in classifying government, we must begin with the most influential classification ever devised. Okay, the device made by Aristotle and his analysis of the 158 city-states of ancient Greece. So come on, let's go back in time and know the methods ever devised, okay, by Aristotle that until today it is very popular and known. Aristotle based his scheme in devising or classifying government on two dimensions. The first dimension refers to the number of people involved in the task of governing, either one, few, or many. And the second dimension is whether the ruler governed in the common interest, or what we call the genuine form of governance, or the ruler governed in his or her own interest, or what we call the perverted form of governance. So in the second scheme, Aristotle is implying that there are two ways to govern the state. First is when the ruler governs in a genuine form, in which the ruler will consider the common good of the society. On the other hand, the perverted form of governing will look into the interest of the ruler at the expense of the interest of the state and the people. But the question is, what type of governance will lead the state to success? Is it the genuine form or the perverted form? For Aristotle, the significance of the second dimension was that a political system would be more stable and effective when the rulers govern in the long-term interest of the community, meaning to say, the genuine form of governance, rather than in the short or narrow interest of their own social group. Okay? Now let us look at the diagram. Putting the scheme of Aristotle in a diagram, we will come up with this kind of illustration. Okay? So we have rule by one, few and many, and what form of governance is being applied by the ruler, okay, in the society or in the state. Is it a genuine or a perverted form of governance? Now, if we are going to cross-classify the number of rulers with the form of rule, according to Aristotle, we will come up with 6 types of government. Okay? 3 from the genuine form and 3 from the perverted form. According to Aristotle, the genuine form of rule by one, in which the ruler works for the common interest, is monarchy. And according to him, it is the legitimate type of government by rule of one. Okay? And the perverse type of government by rule of one is tyranny or dictatorship. Rule by few, on the other hand, wherein there is a few number of people working for the common interest of the state, okay, is aristocracy. And the perverse type of aristocracy, where the rulers will govern for their own interest, is what we call oligarchy, or rule by the rich, compared to aristocracy as rule by the virtues. Yan. Now, rule by many, according to Aristotle, the genuine form is polity, in which it refers to the rule by the moderate, enlightened middle class, in which they exercise their power through the laws. And the perverse type of polity in rule by many is democracy. Bakit kaya? Di ka nakapagtaka na ngayon, ang pagkakaalam natin sa democracy ay ang pinakamagandang type of government na meron sa buong mundo? But why is it that, according to Aristotle, democracy is the perverse type of rule by many? We will look into that later on. Okay? Now, unknown to Aristotle, liberal democracy is the most familiar category or type of government that we have today. Because in this format, rulers are chosen through the existence of free, fair, and regular elections. And the government is subject to constitutional limitations. During the time of Aristotle kasi, the type of democracy they have is more on pure democracy, wherein there is no government that will really limit the people in exercising their rights. Okay? Yan. But unknown to him, today, democracy is being followed. Democracy is being the known type of government that we have today. Okay? Because in here, not only the government is subject to constitutional limitations, but also individual rights are being protected, and also in the exercise of these individual rights, there are corresponding responsibilities, okay, by the citizens who are using and exercising these individual rights. And so let us look into the forms of government. Basically, there are 5 forms of government. Okay, according to the number of rulers, one, few, many, according to the relationship between the executive and the legislative, according to distribution of authority, according to the number of legislative chambers, and according to legitimacy. But in the modern world, pwedeng maging 6 na daw yan. Okay? And the sixth, yung pang-anim na form of government or type of government is according to political ideology. Let us discuss first the form of government as to the numbers of persons exercising the sovereign powers. But as we said a while back, that according to numbers, we have one, few, and many. First, we have monarchy, as ruled by one. Okay? And monarchy refers to the authority and power of a single person. And the supreme and final authority is in the hands of a single person. Through the course of our history, huwag na tayong lumayo, ito yung unang form or type of government that we have in the Philippines. Okay, during the pre-colonial period, wherein in a certain balangay or barangay, okay, it is being ruled by one, and that is the Datu. In Mindanao, we have the Sultan. Yan. There are two classifications of monarchy. First, we have absolute monarchy. This is a practice of unlimited authority and absolute sovereignty vested particularly in a monarch or dictator. Okay? And the essence of this kind of absolutism is that the ruling power is not subject to regularized challenge or check by any other agency. Okay? And if you know King Louis XIV, King Louis XIV of France, he furnished the most familiar assertion of absolutism when he said, "L'état c'est moi," or I am the state. Siya yung nasa gitna ng picture na nakikita nyo ngayon. Okay? Yan. Now, a government in which a monarch agrees to share power with a parliament and abide by a constitution is the limited monarchy. Okay? In here, the monarch will share his power in the existence of a parliamentary. And the monarch here does not hold governmental powers, but only a ceremonial power that will really represent the people of the monarch's state. And today, constitutional monarchies are mostly associated with Western European countries like Great Britain, okay, Netherlands, Belgium, kung saan meron pa rin silang monarch. Okay? In Asia, okay, we have Japan and Thailand. Pero meron pa rin kayang mga bansang sumusunod sa absolute monarchy, wherein their power is being manifested through the use of the principle of absolutism and also through the assertion of divine right. Sa Asia, meron pa kaya? What do you think about Saudi Arabia? Make a research on that. If there are still countries or states that follow absolute monarchy. Okay? Another form of government, according to the number of rulers, is aristocracy. Aristocracy is a term derived from two Greek words, aristos, which means best, and kratos, which means power. Okay? And it is a form of government in which the sovereign power is vested in a small number of citizens who are theoretically the best qualified to rule. And here's the thing. In an aristocracy, although the power of government is wielded by the few, theoretically, the administration of government is carried on the welfare of the many. Okay? And according to Aristotle, Aristocracy is the genuine form of ruling because the aristocrat will rule the people in the common or in their common interest. But whenever the interests of the people as a whole are made subservient to the selfish interest of the rulers, then aristocracy becomes a form of government known as oligarchy, which is the perverse type of ruling, according to the number of ruler. Okay? And we have democracy as ruled by many. And this term was derived from two Greek words, demos, which means the people, and kratein, which means to rule. And today, the type of democracy that we are enjoying is a representative democracy, okay, in which the people will go to the poll, choose their leader, elect their leader, okay, through elections. Now, there are two types of democracy. We have direct or pure democracy, in which no medium of delegates or representatives are chosen to act for them. So there is no presence of election. And the will of the state here is expressed directly and immediately through the people in a mass meeting or assembly. But according to Aristotle, as democracy considered to be a perverse type of ruling because it may lead to mobocracy, or the government of the crowd who are strong physically and mentally and socially. And this type of governing, when lead to mobocracy, has also the possibility that will lead to what? Either oligarchy or tyranny. Because the government will become the government of the strong physically, mentally, and socially. And the other classification of democracy is the indirect or representative democracy, wherein the will of the state is formulated and expressed through the representatives chosen by the people. And unknown to Aristotle, this is the popular and known kind of democracy that we are enjoying and exercising today. And most of the countries around the world are adhering to this type or form of democracy. We're done with the form of government according to the number of rulers. So let us see the form of government as to the relationship between the executive and the legislative branches of the government. In here, the type of government can be determined by looking as to how independent or how dependent are the one who make the laws and the one who implements the law. And there are two types of government here. First, we have the parliamentary government. It is a system in which the powers of the executive and legislative branches are intertwined. So there is the fusion of power between the executive branch and the executive and the legislative branch of government. Okay? Now, there is a weakness of this type of government. The weakness of the parliamentary type of government is the presence of instability. Ganito kasi yon. The Prime Minister is not elected by the people. What is being elected in the government are the members of the parliament, and they are being elected by the people. But the Prime Minister is not elected by the people. So who elects the Prime Minister then? The members of the parliament. Okay? Now, the Prime Minister, who serves as the primus inter pares, or what we call prime among equals, since he or she is voted by the members of the parliament, can also be changed or removed by the members of the parliament. anytime. Okay? Anytime when the members of the parliament will vote against the prime minister with a vote of no confidence. Yan. On the other hand, we have the presidential government, in which the state makes the executive constitutionally independent of the legislative. But there are also few issues in this type of government that can be considered as weakness. Unang-una, yung tinatawag nilang there is a possibility of deadlock. Okay? Deadlock happens when there are disagreements between the two branches of government. There is a slow process of making laws and approving it. Since there are separate entities, they need to undergo a very long process before it will become, or before a bill becomes a law. Okay? Kasi dito sa presidential type of government, once the bill is approved by the legislative, kailangan pang ipadala yung bill na yan sa executive branch of government. And the president must sign the bill in order for it to become a law. Okay? To formally become a law. But when the president did not sign the bill, it will not become a law. Meron kasi tayong tinatawag na veto power ng isang presidente. Okay? But later on, we will look into those concepts as we discuss deeply about the three branches of government. What I'm saying here is that in a presidential type of government, the weakness of this system is the presence of deadlock or the slow-making process of a bill in order to become a law, in which it is the strength of the parliamentary. Okay? Now, the strength of the presidential type of government is that since the president is voted by the people, he or she cannot easily be removed to office or from office. Okay? Yan. Don't worry, we will look into that on how officers are being removed from their office in a presidential type of government. The illustration shows the process on how leaders are being elected in a parliamentary and presidential types of government. As you can see, in a presidential type of government, the members of the legislature and the president as the head of the executive branch are being elected by the people. Unlike in a parliamentary type of government wherein the people will elect the members of the parliament and the members of the parliament will elect the prime minister. Now, to further understand how these two systems works, we should know the distinction between the head of the state and the head of the government. Basically, when you say head of state, it would mean that you are the symbolic representation of a state. But it does not necessarily mean that you have the real power or you are in charge of governing the state. Because the head of the state is symbolic in nature. On the other hand, the head of government is different. When you are the head of government, it means that you have the real political power and you are given the task to govern the state. Therefore, you are the one who really governs the state. And consequently, this distinction is important in comparing the two systems that belong to this category. Okay? So magkaiba pala ang head of state and the head of the government. The head of the state is a symbolic representation of the people, while the head of the government holds the real power in political activities. Now, in a presidential system, the head of the state and the head of the government is the same person. Like our country, okay? The head of the state and the head of the government is no other than our President, Rodrigo Duterte. Even in America, okay? Because they are adhering to the presidential type of government, then the head of the state and the head of government is the same person. Okay? Meaning to say, the president serves as the symbolic representation of the state as well as the one who has the power and in charge of real governance. In a parliamentary system, however, the head of government and the head of the state is different from each other. The head of state depends from one country to another because there are some states having a king or a queen or a president as their heads of the state. In Great Britain, okay, the head of the state is the queen. In China, the head of the state is the president. Okay? Their power is only limited to being symbol of their country. The one who really holds the power in political aspect and in governance is the head of the government or the prime minister. Diba? Klaro na siguro sa inyo yan. Kung anong pagkakaiba when we talk about the head of the government and the head of the state. We also have the form of government according to the distribution of power and authority. We have the unitary government and the federal government. Now, the difference between the two lies on how power is distributed between the national government and the local government. In a federal government, there are two levels of government. The central government or the national government and the state's government. Like in America, they have this kind of government, federal government, wherein there are two levels of government, the central government and the state or federal government. In a unitary government, there is only one level of government, okay? The central government or the national government. Although we have the local government unit, okay, they are still attached to the powers and authority of the national government. Now, how political powers are being shared? In a federal government, political powers are shared by the two levels of government. While in the unitary government, political power is held by the central government only. But there is what we call a decentralization of power. But most of the powers are being held by the national or the central government in a unitary type of government. Okay? In federal type, there are two different types of laws. Okay? The central laws and the federal laws. In a unitary type of government, there is only one set of law, okay, for the whole country. This diagram shows the comparison between the unitary government and the federal government according to structure or according to effecting chain and the example of countries, okay, under these types of government. In a unitary government, as you can see, centralized ang paghawak ng kapangyarihan. Okay? Powers are being devolved from the national government down to the local government. Unlike in a federal government, that there are two layers of governance. Okay? The central governance and the federal governance. In effecting change, in a unitary type of government, changes in local bodies can be made by executive orders. While in a federal government, changes can be made with consent of the parliament. Okay? An example of countries under the unitary type of government, isali na natin dyan ang Pilipinas. Okay? Aside from that, China, France, Singapore, Myanmar, United Kingdom, at marami pang klaseng unitary type of government. While on the federal type of government, ang madalas na example natin dito is no other than the United States of America. But aside from US, kasali din dyan ang Germany, ang India, Iraq, and other federal type of government around the world. Okay? Can you name some countries that are adhering in a unitary type of government or a federal type of government? Another form of government is according to the number of legislative chambers. In this category, the different types of government relies on the number of legislative chambers that the state might have. And generally, there are two types of government according to the number of legislative chambers. First, we have the unicameral legislative. This type of government would have a single chamber. Okay? And an example of a state with a unicameral legislative is Germany. And all other states wherein they are adhering to a parliamentary type of government. Now, like the types of government according to the relationship between the executive and the legislative, there are also strengths and weaknesses of the unicameral and bicameral legislatures. In a unicameral legislative, one strong point is the speed of policy making. Since it has only one house or only one chamber, then policy making is faster as compared to a bicameral legislature, kung saan dadaan pa sa dalawang house ang paggawa ng batas. Okay? Another strength of a unicameral legislature is also the prevention of deadlock, which is present sa bicameral legislature kung merong hindi pagkakaintindihan ang dalawang house or between the legislative and the executive branches of government. Yan. In a bicameral legislature, it has two chambers. We have the upper house and the lower house. Okay? An example of this type of setup would be our country, the Philippines. Because our Congress is composed of two houses. The Senate as the upper house and the House of Representatives as the lower house. So huwag kayong malilito na kapag sinabi natin Kongreso, ay hindi tumutukoy sa mga congressman natin. No. Because our Congress is composed of two houses, kung saan nakapaloob ang mga senador at ang mga congressmen natin, including the party list representative. Okay? Now, in a bicameral system, the advantage is also with the way that the law will be examined. Since it will be examined by two houses, the law that can come out is more thoroughly examined rather than just passing through one house. Kagaya ng nangyayari sa unicameral legislature. Mabilis, pero hindi gaano na-examine yung paggawa ng batas. Yan. Another strength would be the existence of checks and balances. The existence of the principles of checks and balances between the two houses, which would prevent one house from abusing its power. And in a bicameral legislature, the people are also more represented, unlike in a unicameral legislature. Lastly, but of equal importance as form of government is according to legitimacy. And there are two types of government according to legitimacy. First, we have the de jure type of government, in which this kind of government is founded on formal and constitutional means. Meaning to say that if a leader is chosen through an election, which is a formal way of establishing a government, then the government that will be established is considered to be a de jure type of government. On the other hand, de facto type of government refers to the kind of government that relies on informal and unconstitutional means. So if a president is put into position outside the legal framework, okay, like people power, rebellion, or coup d'etat, then the type of government that will be established is a de facto government. So you know now, what do we mean when we talk about de jure government and de facto government? Actually, in our country, naranasan na natin itong dalawang klaseng gobyerno na to. Okay? Usually, we are experiencing the de jure type of government because most of the time, we undergo election to choose our leader. But there was a time in our country wherein we have the de facto type of government. Alam niyo ba kung kailan yan? Nung panahon ni Corazon Aquino. Okay? That type of government that put Corazon Aquino into power is a de facto type of government because the means is outside the legal framework through people power revolution. Okay? And so, on the basis of the classifications of government that we discussed, it can be said that the Philippine government today is a representative democracy, unitary government, bicameral Congress, presidential, and de jure form of government. Okay? Aside from that, our government also embodies some aspects of pure democracy, such as on the constitutional provision on initiative and referendum. This concept, don't worry, will be discussed when we have our discussion of the 1987 Constitution. At kung bakit sinasabi natin na yung concepts of initiative and referendum is an aspect of pure democracy. Yan. The Philippine government takes place also in an organized framework of, yun, nakikita nyo, presidential, representative, democratic republic type of government whereby the president is both the head of the state and the head of the government. Ganda palang maging presidente, no? You can run when you are already at the right age. Okay? Actually, nung bata ako, pangarap ko maging presidente. Di pa ako nakakarating sa barangay. So, mag-umpisa muna ako sa barangay. Okay? Indeed, it is a great journey with you humanistas. And certainly, the concept of government is very fascinating to study and learn. And you are now much equipped with knowledge and understanding on the significant basic concepts in the study of politics and governance. With this, you are now ready to answer the activities given to you this week, and after which, you may have an advanced reading about the nature and concept of power. So, job well done. Thank you for watching. See you next week. Bye-bye, humanistas. Pahabol pala, humanistas. Muntik ko lang makalimutan. Okay? Reading assignment ko na lang yung politics and globalization. Kasi kasali yan sa quiz. Okay? Bye. Thanks for watching again.